All right, it is officially 6:30, so maybe we should officially kick this thing off. And I think I might just begin by saying, now that everybody has logged in, if you would like to turn your cameras off, probably do so now, because if this is being recorded and there is every possibility that Kino will be popping this up online to watch later on YouTube. Actually, that will probably definitely happen. So if you would like to not be viewed on YouTube, turn off your cameras. If you're happy to just be a part of this audience, then by all means, we welcome you. We wave at you. That is brilliant. Hello, everybody. I can't even, I'll briefly do speak of you just to be like, oh my goodness, Fiona Wood, Melanie, everybody is here. Selena, hi. This is amazing. Of course, Jenna Guillaume is here. Let me begin, though, as we should always do, by acknowledging the country on which we land. I would like to acknowledge that one of the beautiful things, speaking from Melbourne lockdown, I'm looking for the beautiful things. One of the beautiful things about doing Zoom launches now is that everybody can be involved, and they are truly a more accessible way to do these things. And I think that is truly wonderful. So for instance, I am beaming to you all from lockdown Melbourne. I'm on the lands of the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and Jenna is on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, I do believe. And that is a beautiful thing. And it is worth acknowledging as well for our elders, past, present, and emerging. I think it is a beautiful thing in lockdown, as we've been doing these virtual events, that we've possibly been learning more about where people are actually from in terms of Indigenous land, which is rightfully theirs, because, side note, sovereignty was never ceded. I think that's a really important and beautiful thing that has come out of the kind of bleakness of 2020. So that is wonderful. I can also see in the chat that somebody is beaming to us from Kuala Lumpur. So hi, Malaysia. That is a beautiful, wonderful thing. That is so cool. And now I also get to tell you that I'm here in capacity. My name is Danielle Binks. I'm the author of The Year the Maths Changed, but more importantly, I'm a literary agent. And even more importantly, I am Jenna Guillaume's literary agent. I'll just repeat that as well, Jenna Guillaume. I know some people, when they see the name on the book cover, I know I was calling her Jenna. I won't say what I was calling her. I had to double check, though, that it was indeed a French name, and it is Guillaume. So let me just read from the book to introduce Jenna. Jenna Guillaume, for those listening at home, Guillaume is a journalist and author who grew up in Wollongong and now lives in Sydney. In addition to young adult fiction, Jenna writes for publications such as BuzzFeed, Junkee, the Sydney Morning Herald, and The Guardian about very important things like pop culture, identity, feminism, social media, and her fave OTPs, one-tree pairings. Previously, Jenna was editor-at-large for BuzzFeed Australia and features editor at Girlfriend magazine. You Were Made for Me is her second novel. Indeed it is, because her first was What I Like About Me. Ooh, so this is now her second novel. Ooh, this year she also came out in print in the USA, and she is forthcoming in France. So a French edition of What I Like About Me is coming out soon. The US edition of You Were Made for Me is also coming out soon. Jenna is a global phenomenon. I'm willing to say that as her agent. Welcome, Jenna. Hi, how are you?
What an introduction.
That's what they pay me the big bucks for. And by them, I mean you. Yes. I am delighted to be here, Jenna, especially because I get to pay back the favor. You launched me way back in May. That was approximately 10 years ago. And now I get to come back and do the same for you. And I'm terribly excited to ask you these questions, even though I know lots of the answers already. So let's kick things off. And I will just say, I've done a few of these Zoom events now. So if anybody wants to pop a question into the chat, I do have the chat box open. I can look and do both. I can walk and chew gum. I'm truly spectacular. So if you have a question for Jenna, we're not actually going to open up and let everyone talk at once. That gets a little bit mayhem. But if you do have a question for Jenna, I will attribute it to you and I will ask on your behalf. So feel free to pop it in the chat throughout, okay? So let's kick this off. So Jenna, when you sold, let's say, What I Like About Me, it was actually in a 2-book deal. So you had the manuscript for What I Like About Me for Penn Macmillan, and then you had a TBD, to be determined, second book. And I remember at one point coming to you and being like, hey, what's that second book going to be? And you, I quote, I believe, said it was going to be a weird science thing. So I'm just going to show you my little prop. Weird science being the 80s movie galore. that was how you pitched this story idea to me, was you did Dirty Dancing mashup for your first book, and the second book you wanted to do Weird Science. Can you talk us through what the thinking was of wanting to update Weird Science of all 80s properties? Talk us through that, please.
That doesn't sound like a very good pitch, does it? It's a weird for anyone paying attention at home, don't take after my pitching skills. But no, I think what was interesting was, well, originally, which you would remember, but I don't, other people wouldn't know, is that originally I was writing more of a companion novel to What I Like About Me, which focused on Anna, who's the secondary character in that. But I was finding it really hard to find her voice. And so I spoke to you, Danielle, and you were like, put that aside and try something different, which was the best advice ever, because literally the next day, and I don't know where it came from. I hadn't watched Weird Science in a long time. So, but I mean, I grew up with it and I really loved it growing up, but I don't know like what in the atmosphere made it enter my head. But the first thing that entered my head was the very first line of You Were Made For Me, which is, the day I created a boy started out like any other. And immediately when that happened, I just had like all these images in my head of like the first like opening scenes, the first few scenes, right up until there's a point in the book where like obviously it's about these two girls and they create this perfect boy. And what happens is she, like Katie, who's the main character, she goes, they do this thing, nothing happens immediately. She goes to bed and then wakes up. It's not a spoiler, it's pretty early on, but she wakes up in the middle of the night with this naked boy in her bed next to her. And so that was like basically, for some reason, all these things flashed in my head right up to this naked boy in this girl's bed, which sounds creepy now that I say it out loud. But so I thought that, and then I was like, oh, it's just like Weird Science. And so I went back and I rewatched Weird Science. And I was like, I can totally do a modern version of this that is like much more focused on the female gaze and female design, flipping that on its head.
Well, I mean, to that note, let's just unpack. I mean, Weird Science was how you pitched it to me, and I think my face was, let's read that first before I comment. And then I obviously read the first few pages and it was so funny. I was so delighted and I thought, of course, this is Jenna writing. Of course it's good. But let's unpack that for a second, because actually even Weird Science kind of has its foundations in Greek mythology, in the story of Pygmalion, which is the story of a sculptor who makes a stone statue that comes to life, and it is his ideal woman. This has also been replicated in the actual play and also in My Fair Lady, which is the story of taking a what does she sell? Flowers on the street, a Cockney Londoner, and transforming her into a lady. So this has been done before, this idea of imagining your ideal person and kind of crafting them in your own mind as you want them. And I think it's really interesting that in your story, You Were Made For Me, which is a great title, by the way, who came up with that? I think it's really interesting that you touch on things like you really expand on the trope of insta-love. That's probably what this book spins around, is the trope of insta-love, which is also interesting because it's kind of got tendrils back to What I Like About Me, which was a trope of enemies to lovers in a lot of ways, but bypassed the idea of that character, Maisie, had it in her head what her ideal love interest was, and it didn't end up being that guy. It ended up being the guy that she thought she hated. So I could see tendrils of your first book in the second one. Can you just unpack for us what those big themes are in You Were Made For Me? Much as I think you're selling it by saying there's a naked boy that ends up in the bed, it is a little bit deeper than that. Like, there is Greek mythology to this, but there's also the concept of, you know, the way that boys have pressure put on them to have a certain body ideal, the same way that you investigated that with Maisie in What I Like About Me, etc. Can you just unpack those sort of deeper connections in the book?
Yeah, it definitely, as you said, oh, by the way, who came up with You Were Made For Me, the brilliant title? It was Danielle. So thank you for that. No, so it definitely was an extension of What I Like About Me. And I think what was interesting when I was promoting What I Like About Me and doing, it was at the Sydney Writers Festival actually, I remember it kind of came up on a panel that I was on there, and someone asked about this kind of, the idea that a lot of boys in YA, especially probably, I mean, talking about like the really popular YA, the paranormal romance and that kind of stuff, they are these literal gods, and they are these like really idealized boys, and they fall instantly in love with the main character. And it is a total fantasy. It's not realistic at all. And I wanted to, and I did touch on that in What I Like About Me, in the sense that at the start, Maisie has this crush on this boy, and she has an idealized version of him in her head, but he's not a perfect boy at all. I mean, he's one, I love him, but he's not perfect. And then she has this other boy who she thinks is like awful, and he turns out to be quite lovely. So I had played with that, but I wanted to go even further and take that kind of godlike ideal boy, and he's literally like he's like springs up out of nowhere from clay, and he's like 6 foot tall, and he looks like a long lost Hemsworth brother, and you know, he's like this golden boy. And so I wanted to like take that trope and he falls instantly in love with Katie, and play with like, what does that actually look like in real life, or is real life as this is? How does it actually feel to suddenly have this gorgeous boy drop out of the sky and be in love with you? And maybe it's not actually such an ideal situation.
And I think your book is the perfect anecdote to those who are maybe trying to get through the big chunk of that is Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, which again is that trope of the perfect sparkling vampire boy who literally sparkles and is literally in insta love with Bella the second he smells her. Oh, how romantic. The pheromones. Yours is kind of the perfect antidote to that. It is unpacking the idea that we have, especially as teenagers, which I think we all did, was idealize our versions of the happily ever after. And it is very body centric, it is very beauty centric, and that's unhealthy for both boys and girls, males and females, and everything in between. I think you did a really great job of unpacking that for both sides of the spectrum. I think it was wonderful. My next question was going to be, just to again show everybody the prop that I have, which is my John Hughes DVD set. My question was going to be about how difficult it was to take the weird science property and update it, because I don't know if you guys can tell, but it's not a great representation of modernity, I guess. So that's part of my question. But then Georgina on private messages to me as well would like to know how hard it is to borrow or else steal ideas from main properties. Like, how do you strike that balance between being inspired by and outright stealing? When do you know you've hit that right balance? And particularly with weird science that you wanted to update and make a little bit more modern in a lot of sensibilities, how did you balance all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think with weird science, I didn't think for a second that I was like just copying it outright or stealing it. It was very much in the beginning was like, I'm doing something new with the idea. And I think like, for me, like tropes and, I mean, there's only so many stories, right? And they're just retold in a different way. And I think of that with tropes as well. Like you mentioned before, like What I Like About Me has enemies to lovers. This one has insta lovers. Like those, you see them everywhere. And I'm not worried about that. It's like, what can I do with it? And what can I, what elements can I combine to create my own story? So I did watch Weird Science, and I did think seriously about how much I should take from it and how much I should rely on it. I'm not taking a lot, basically, beyond the original concept, because the movie itself, I don't know if anyone's watched it in a while, and actually, like when I've been talking to people about You Were Made for Me, a lot of people, when I say, oh, it's like a modern Weird Science, a lot of people are like, what's Weird Science? I was like, oh, okay. More of a niche thing that I was into. I mean, it is John Hughes, so you know, and Robert Downey Jr. is in it, like
I know, crazy,
one of his early movies. But no, it's about these two really geeky boys who create this beautiful ideal woman, and basically like she's magical. She can like she can snap things out of the air, and she just gives them everything they want, like riches, cars, all of this stuff. Like it's really like far-fetched, and it's set all over one weekend. They have this big party, basically. There's a rocket ends up in the house. Mad Max characters, because Mad Max was huge at the time, Beyond Thunderdome. Mad Max characters come to the party, like actual characters from the movie.
And just to be clear, that's not in your book. You didn't take those wonderful ideas and pop them into yours, because they were awful.
I was like, I'm not doing this. And didn't want to. And so I wanted a much more grounded approach, and I wanted it to still feel very much like a contemporary novel, but with this light magical element. So basically, like the idea of this boy, that's just kind of the setup for the adventures to come. And he's a fully formed 17-year-old boy, which is another thing, you know, in Weird Science, she's an adult woman, and it gets really she's an adult, she gets quite sexual with the boys. And it's uncomfortable, and I was like, no, I mean, it's not, you know, it's quite clean, a clean book, you know, that
it is, yes, it is, because I think you touch on the consent issues as well in a really interesting way and a very thoughtful way. I was just thinking as well, probably the more known property is that Tyra Banks movie where she was like a Barbie doll and becomes the ideal mother for a young kid. So it seems to be that people, much like you, have gone either to the middle of the spectrum, like not giving them an adult sized man as their ideal, or they go like it's a young girl's ideal mother figure, you know. So it's really interesting.
Well, I wanted it to be like what is the ideal for a teen girl, or like what's her I know it was kind of these guys from like popular like YA titles and that kind of thing, but also like I wanted him, like I did play for a little while with him being that really overprotective, overbearing type, of like really possessive. Just like, couldn't deal with it. I just wanted him to be like a soft golden boy, like a really like sweet, like you know, a little bit. I was inspired by Brendan Fraser in like every movie he's ever been in. And like a little bit like Thor from like the Marvel movies, where like he's very intelligent, but he's in this, you know, in the first movie where he's an alien who comes to Earth, and he doesn't know.
The Brendan Fraser thing though, now that you've said that, what is that Alicia Silverstone Brendan Fraser movie?
Blast from the Past.
Yes, that is it. That is, if anyone needs even more convincing, that is the archetype of just the sweet, dopey, lovable golden boy. That's 100% it. I love that. Yes, we've hit on it perfectly.
Brendan Fraser, he was in Encino Man and George of the Jungle. He's done this over and over again. So yeah, I wanted it to be that, and then also like very much like focus on the female gaze and like what does it mean? Because I think there's something really gross about two horny teenage boys creating this ideal woman. Yeah. But I find it like more interesting to flip that and what do these girls learn through creating this boy?
No, you had me at female gaze. That I'm there. I'm good. Now though, let's just acknowledge for a second, 2 books out. Second book, a book a year basically so far. Let's keep this up, Jenna. A book a year. What were the challenges between writing book 1 and book 2? What was the biggest hurdles for writing the second book?
Well, the biggest hurdle initially was, I know I mentioned earlier, like I was actually writing a totally different book. So, and the voice, I couldn't find the voice, and especially because that one was a companion to What I Like About Me, all I could hear was my voice in my head, and it was very fresh. So that was a challenge in itself. But then once I put that aside, with You Were Made For Me, it was really fun, and I was really excited about having a really fun idea. But then, you know, especially because it is quite weird, I was a bit like, oh, is it too different to What I Like About Me? Like, am I going to like too far away from this? But then I also, you know, because I'm a writer and a neurotic writer, I suppose I had this thing where I was like, well, what if it's too similar? You know, it's still a rom-com, it's still, these tropes are in it. And then I just had a meltdown.
I was also CC'd into all of these conversations. I was the ping pong between all of these comments. I was playing devil's advocate for all of them. Yes. But then we did settle on that. I think, as will always be the case, there are threads in your stories. And like, I just pulled apart the threads of the tropes that you were playing around with in What I Like About Me, and how they sort of came out in different ways and You Were Made For Me. I think sometimes you just need someone to have a bird's eye view and tell you, oh, this is what you're like, because you don't always know what you're like. You know, the forest for the trees thing, as you're an author, you're not always sure when you're actually in the page, in the story. You don't really always have a bird's eye view, which is why you have someone like me to come along and say, oh no, this is how they connect. And then I think you sort of breathe a sigh of relief, and we're like, oh, that is very true. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. That definitely helps. And I think, it was hard. It was just like, I think it's interesting because when you're writing your first novel, it is very much, it's a thing you're doing for yourself, on your own. You can take as long as you want because you don't have a deadline, you know. I mean, it's only self-imposed deadlines. Well, that was the case for me anyway. And then with this one, you know, because I had the 2-book deal and I had people wait for the writing. That was not first one. So that was another added pressure of like, oh God, what if everyone hates it? Or, you know, what if I can't get it done in time? And I think just having less time with this one as well was like just a different experience.
Well, do you want to tell people how long it took you to write What I Like About Me? How long you sat with that one?
I think by the time it came out, at least 4 years.
Yeah. So that's quite different from like a 12-month turnaround for another story, roughly. Exactly. Yeah. But you've done a very good job. Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't writing that whole time, but it's, you know, even when I wasn't consciously thinking of those characters or that world, I feel like they were still in my head somewhere. So, whereas this one I had a much more dedicated amount of time thinking about it and developing rather than just letting it bubble away, because I didn't have time to slowly let it bubble away. I had to like be a bit more proactive about it. So that was a new experience.
Well, since we're on the topic of, you know, what sort of thematically connects your work and what are the similarities that you have in your writing, I want to point out that it's something that is present in all of your work so far, and I think always, will be a focus on female friendships and just friendships generally. And we actually had a question come in that Kinokunya sent through. One of them was, which character is the most difficult to write and which is the easiest? And I'd love to know that, but I'd also love to know if it's easier to write friendships or romances. Which is the easier to get right for balance?
Yeah. I'll answer your question first. I think friendship is probably a little bit harder to get right. I mean, not to be like, I mean, romance can be hard and also like is, you know, important and nuanced and everything, but I feel like there are so many more complications and nuances with friendship, and especially friendship between girls, I think.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more complicated. But I will say, like, I love writing romance, obviously, but I really loved writing the friendship with Katie and Libby in this book. And specifically the way that Libby's voice came through. Not many people will have read it yet. So basically, Katie is the narrator of the story, but every so often, Libby will interject with her own edits almost and her own opinions. And her was really strongly, and that happened really immediately, and helps, like, that dual voice was what really got me excited about the book, and I think, like, pushed me through the writing. And actually, those exchanges were some of the most fun to write as well. And they have some emotional scenes as well, which I think were like harder to write, but also like more satisfying in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really loved writing that friendship and like the journey that it goes on in this book. And then the other
easiest and hardest character to write across both books, if you think one character from one book was easier or harder.
Okay, easiest and hardest characters to write. I would say the easiest in You Were Made for Me, the easiest was, gosh, I feel like they were all a little bit hard.
Okay, all right.
I would say like the easiest was probably Libby was the easiest to write.
Yeah.
Because her voice was so strong. And I feel like for me, like that's really, I've learned through 2 books, is like that's really key to me, is like hearing the character's voice.
Yeah.
Sound a bit hearing her in my head. But no, like just she told her story, you know, whereas other characters I had to be a bit more like aggressive and try and pull it out of them.
Yeah. That's fair enough.
Start talking about the character, like it sounds so nuts, but no, I mean it is kind of how else you talk about it. And then the hardest to write, I would say probably, I feel like Katie was actually maybe hard to write in the sense that she is self-involved at times, and so it was hard to nail that balance of like that's her character, but like hopefully she's not too annoying.
Can I just also say, someone in the chat whose name is also Katie just commented and was like, checks out. I pictured this in a very deadpan, checks out. Like, all Katies unite.
And we're all a bit self-absorbed, right? And it is her story and in her head. Yeah. And so, like, you're reading her thoughts. And so at times, you know, it is a bit like, you know, maybe pull yourself out of it a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the journey she goes on, is to becoming a little less self-absorbed. And also I have to say, Guy was easy and hard to write in different ways. He's the guy that they create.
I was going to say, is that a spoiler when you say his name is Guy? The guy is Guy. That spoiler, yeah. Brilliant name. The most brilliant name. When you came up with that, I was like, oh my gosh. Genius at work. Guy.
Yes, Guy.
So good. Yeah.
So he was really easy in the sense that he was really fun to write. He is this really innocent, sweet boy and just like a golden retriever puppy of a human being that the day before. So that was really fun, but it was also really hard to nail. It was a challenge to figure out how far to push him and like how far to push the limits of believability, because it's a really bizarre thing. And also the characters around him, how much were they just accepting the situation, how much were they questioning it? That was
I think that was a very good answer. That sort of shows us your process and how belabored and hard it is, but then you write it so seamlessly. It's really quite intimidating. I also want to say that in your process as well, you hire authenticity readers. And I wonder if you can tell, for people sitting at home who don't know what authenticity, sometimes called sensitivity readers are, could you please talk us through that process and just how they've helped you? Because you've had them in both books. You're now an author who has never written a book without authenticity readers, which also speaks to the fact that you will always have a diverse cast in your stories as well, which is another thematic connection, I think. So can you just talk us through the process of having authenticity readers, what that means for you and your processes, and how they improve the book, basically?
Yeah, so for people who don't know, authenticity readers basically read the novel in draft form and give notes on specific identities that they share with certain characters. So for instance, with What I Like About Me, I had people, authenticity readers, reading for gay representation, fat representation, because even though that's an identity that I have myself, I want to make sure, basically the idea of an authenticity reader is that you want it to be as authentic as possible, and also have someone who, as an outsider, like looking for any red flags or anything that might be like inauthentic, but also like offensive, which maybe you do deliberately, but as as someone who only has a narrow your own worldview, we can be ignorant of certain things. And so so I had I think I had about 6 or 7 with What I Like About Me, and I think I had about 5 or 6 with You Were Made for Me. I mean, a big one was Libby's character, because she's Filipino Australian, and there's other identities in the book as well. There's an asexual character, a gay character, and I wanted obviously I want my books to reflect reality, or a reality where people can create boys out of clay, but no, like a reality set in the real world, which is of course diverse and has a variety of people. And so it's really important to represent that, but also I'm only limited to my own knowledge and my own imagination, but that only takes you so far. So I think it's really important to have people like help out with that, and that was really invaluable actually, because there's just like little subtle nuances that you just say with Libby, who's Filipino Australian, like me as a white person, like I don't fully understand the kind of sibling dynamic in Libby's, and so even those really subtle little things to convey that more effectively were really helpful.
And it's done really brilliantly, and it feels like a fuller cast and a very true representation of how kids actually go to school now. This is what their friendship groups look like. This is what the world looks like. So you're just being honest, I think, and it's wonderfully done. Before we go off the topic of this book in particular, Claire West, hi Claire, has a great question where she said, Jenna, I love the Spotify playlist that you created for this book, but if you had to choose one song from it to represent the whole book's vibe, what would it be? One song. Is it going to be a BTS song?
No, there's no BTS songs on the playlist. I almost did, but there was none that were quite right for this book. No, I would say Girls Just Want to Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper.
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
That's the song that actually, I think that was the first one on the playlist. I was like, that's like the vibe that I want the book to have, is girls having fun.
Yeah, that's really good. And then we also have a question, it's like kind of technical question from Chloe, which is, what do you think is the intended age bracket for this book? Because, you know, we've been discussing that there's a boy that appears naked in the bed, etc. What do you think is the age bracket? Given that this is also a humorous book and it is very PG.
Yeah, I would say 13 plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like even though he does pop up naked, it's like if this was a movie, you wouldn't see any full frontal nudity, you know, like.
That's a very good way to put it. Yeah, there's sheets. Yeah, or it's a cut to the curtains. Yeah, 100%. That's really good.
It's not
good
like
way to put it.
He shows up naked and she immediately runs because as you do it when you're straight where he shows up in your bed.
I agree. Yes, I agree. And I would just like to point out that a Sam Roundtree has said no BTS, the betrayal, Jenna. So I think when you log onto Twitter, you're going to see that the BTS army has come out to shame you. Just putting it out there.
No, I will say there is some Easter eggs. There's at least one Easter egg, BTS Easter egg in the book. The only BTS fans will understand.
Okay. Do you also just want to say what BTS stands for, in case?
Well, BTS is a Korean band who I'm obsessed with.
Yeah, okay. That's all we need to know. Some people will have just like tuned out for a second and been like, I'm not going to get into it. Okay. I have a bit of a curly question for you that you may want to be, it's up to you how much you want to share. But okay, so what I like about me was a Dirty Dancing ode in many ways. We have established that You Were Made for Me is weird science vibes. Why the 80s? Why this time period? Why these properties? Is it because they are just so good, or is it because they would be better if they were tweaked slightly? Is my first question, and then I'm going to have a second one. So yeah, why the 80s, Jenna? Why are you obsessed with the 80s?
Well, I'm an 80s baby myself. You know, but I was very young in the 80s, so I was born in the 80s, and I don't remember a lot of it, but I think it just a lot of it came through to the 90s and my childhood. Like I grew up watching Weird Science, I grew up watching Dirty Dancing, and also I think it was like what I grew up with, but also at enough distance that it wasn't my culture as such. It was nostalgic even then. So like as a teen, like I remember being a teenager and going to like Video Easy and like like renting all the John Hughes movies. Like you get like 7 weeklies for $7. And so
I was going to say, do we have to explain what Video Easy is for any potential actual teenagers who are here? That's just going to be soul crushing for some. I can't do it, Jenna. Do you want to explain what Video Easy is, what the concept was? It was like Netflix, but real. It was like physical Netflix.
You had to pay for the individual items. It wasn't like a subscription. But anyway, no, you could rent movies for a week to sit like $1 each.
No, you know what? It's the place that Captain Marvel crashes into in the Marvel movie. You know, she crashes into a Video Easy. Yeah. It's that archaic. Okay, it was a gag in the latest Captain Marvel movie. All right, so yeah. Gabrielle Tozer worked at a Video Easy. There you go.
I wanted
That's
to.
A little. So did I. I applied and didn't get a call back.
Yeah. No, it was a really hard application process. But anyway, that's the whole. No, so I used to watch all the John Hughes movies, and I was just obsessed with them. And I think, like for me, they really, they are symbolic, or they're so like, the epitome of the ideal teenage experience, or like in pop culture, like they are our teen stories, and even the teen movies after in the 90s and the noughties, and even now, owe so much. Even you say something like Love Before, which came out recently, like that's very explicitly like that references 16 Candles. Like I just feel like John Hughes created teen stories like no one had before, and I think that's why it's of pop culture and why literature probably owes so much to him. And I think that's for me it's true. It's just like that is like that's the origin story almost, and we're just like I'm gonna take that and remix it and do it in my own way. And also like they're wonderful and I love them and I have a very soft spot for them, but they are deeply problematic in a lot of ways and very outdated. And so they are also ripe for updating and bringing them into a more modern context.
Yeah, I agree. Claire West, your pizza's just arrived. Well done, you. I also think it's really interesting in America. It was like American Graffiti and John Hughes really went a long way to crafting the teen experience that we still have to this day. So even back then, American teenagers didn't know what an American teenager looked like. They had to sort of have it sold to them through media and marketing and pop culture. But it was, as you say, it was such a strong marketing tool that did so damn well that we still have it to this day. And I know that even now, Australian teenagers, when they think of parties, they think of the red plastic cups. All of that really iconography that has its genesis in the 80s, really. Born out of kind of middle-aged white men deciding what they thought teenagers were doing, not even harking back to their own experiences. I think because John Hughes has said he was an outright geek. He was the kid in the stands at his gymnasium, just kind of watching all the cool kids. So that's really interesting. I think you could do a whole kind of seminar on that, Jenna, on what is the teen experience, because you've written for Girlfriend, BuzzFeed, etc. This is kind of your domain in pop culture. You could definitely write about how we've all been sort of fooled into thinking we know what the teen experience is, but even Americans in the 80s didn't know what their teen experience was.
Yeah,
fascinating.
Yeah.
So my other question attributed to this is, we know that you've updated properties from the 80s. This is a bit of a leading question because I know the answer, but what is another adaptation that you would like to work on one day for a future work? I am asking you this into a corner. You're literally in a corner. Answer the question. Answer it.
I don't want to give too much away because I don't want to. What if it's terrible?
One, it won't be. And two, I don't think anyone's going to be shocked that you have a desire to adapt in this realm. So maybe just.
It's a Jane Austen title. Surprise! That's
Oh my God.
Yeah, taking inspiration, but it's so intimidating. It's Jane Austen. How can I do this?
Oh, if anyone can do it, you can do it. Are you kidding me? Okay. All right. So we put it out there. I'm also using this as agent to go back and say, look, you said you have to deliver for the people now. So thank you all for being part of this little ploy of mine. We have another question that came through over email, which was, question for Jenna: who would you love to dream cast for a movie adaptation to this novel?
Oh gosh, that's so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, Guy would be like Chris Hemsworth at 17. So that's obviously.
Yeah, it's awkward when you have actors in mind, but shave off 10 or 20 years. That's hard.
Yeah, so whoever the undiscovered future Hemsworth is.
Right.
Yeah, and it's really hard with the other characters. Say someone like Theo as well. So he is he's a plus size boy, and so
yeah.
I don't think there's any young plus size male actors that could play him. I feel like that would have to be an undiscovered.
I feel like you're also a real champion for finding new talent. I mean, you're somebody who always follows new TV shows. We'll get into that in a second. And you're very encouraging of young actors, and you're very praising of them in your writing when you do write-ups for pop culture pieces for freelance. So I think you're somebody, if you were in the creator's chair for a television adaptation, I think you're somebody who would probably want to see new talent, and new Australian talent, especially that didn't come from Neighbours or Home and Away, would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I will say, I think the mother character in either of my books, I think my mum's championing Reese Witherspoon.
Oh, I thought you were going to say your mum wants the role.
No.
She wants to cast herself. And I was going to be like, yeah, that checks out. Go for it.
She really wants Reese Witherspoon to pick up my books and just play the mother role. So, let's put that into the universe.
Speaking as your agent, if Reese Witherspoon wanted to pop this on her Reese's book club, I too would be very thrilled. Reese Witherspoon, somebody make it happen. I think I'm the person that's meant to hop to with that click. Make it happen. We had another question. I had another question via email, which was, how hard do you find it to switch between fiction writing and doing your sort of pop culture journalist freelance writing? How do you switch between them? How do you get into the mood to write those two separate ways?
When I was writing What I Like About Me, I actually was writing that in the mornings before work. So that would be my time to work on that, and then I would kind of go and do my job at BuzzFeed for the rest of the day. That was really separated. One thing you asked before, what's the chance of the second book? What was really interesting with this one was I'm now a freelancer, and so my time is really flexible, and it's up to me to do it. And I don't have that natural split of writing this one at home and the other work is at an office. It's all in the same. So that was more of a challenge, and just like organizing my time to find the right balance. So I ended up having like splitting more of my days. So I would have days where I did more of the entertainment writing, and then days when I would do the fiction writing, and that was more of how I separated it in my mind.
Okay, so it's just about balance, basically, which is always a really infuriating bit of advice that writers give. Just find your balance. Like, that's not what I was looking for. That's not the save all, cure all for being a good writer. Dang it.
I know,
Sorry, people.
It's all a work in progress as well. Like, it's really like,
yeah.
as you go, and what worked, say for me, like the experience of writing the two books was totally different, and what worked for the first book didn't work for the second. So I feel like you have to discover it every single time.
Yeah, very, very true. Okay, so I have two more questions for you. We have Chloe that has a question that I'm scrolling back to from earlier. If anyone else has questions for Jenna, pop them in the chat now, because we'll get to them. I promise you we'll get to them. Victoria said someone get Reese on the phone. I completely concur. My question to you, Jenna, was in the vein of you being a freelancer and pop culture genius, what are 3 books you recommend we read this year and 3 television shows that you recommend we watch? I'm not going to say movies because nothing's really coming out, really. If you want to say movies as well, go for it. But I want 3 recs of TV shows and books from you, the rec queen.
Okay. Well, 3 books. Oh, obviously, the Year the Maps Changed by Danielle.
No, be serious. I'll pay you later. Yeah.
Also, like, the thing is, I haven't had that much time to read, so that was like, you know, the books that I am going to recommend are probably not that much of a surprise because I've talked about them a lot. I feel.
Yeah.
Changed by Danielle, which I was lucky enough to launch, and no, generally is a really beautiful story. It's set in the 90s, which, you know, I love.
Yeah.
It's really relevant to now, which is because it's about kind of refugees and communities coming together and really beautiful things. So I would highly recommend that. And also, you know, they all came out on the same day. So you know exactly what I'm going to say. Peter Lyer's Rating Normal by Anna Waitley.
Yeah.
And Please Don't Hug Me by Kay Kerr. And just like they've been like the highlight of my reading year. They all came out on the same day. I got them all together. They've got beautiful covers that all look good together. So I would highly recommend it. All Australian. Yours is showing middle grade, but the other 2 are Australian YA, which really fun reads. And then TV shows. Babysitter's Club on Netflix. The new Babysitter's Club was I was so worried it was terrible. But yeah, no, it was really wonderful and really faithful to the books while modernizing it. I'd also say The Great, which is on Stan in Australia, which is about Catherine the Great, but like
loved it.
A really funny, weird version of it. And Nicholas Hoult as Emperor Peter was hilarious.
So good.
And then it's so cheesy, but The Beauty and the Baker. No, The Baker and the Beauty, it's called.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it's the cheesiest show you would ever. It's like a Hallmark movie, but like in a series version. And it's about like a celebrity who falls in love with an ordinary baker. And
it's based on a telenovela, right? A Spanish telenovela. Yeah, so, it's really good. It is really good.
It's like really comfort viewing, which I think we need right now.
Yeah, I agree with all of those, especially my book, Obs. Can I also just say, the funniest thing was when you were launching me, you said that my book reminded you of My Girl. And I was like, of course your brain goes straight to the late 90s adaptation connection. Like, of course it does. I would also throw out another Netflix show, Never Have I Ever, which is a Mindy Kaling production, which is just the funniest thing I've seen in the last few months. And I needed a laugh being in Melbourne. It was the sweetest, funniest show. And for those of you who go by tropes, it has an enemies to lovers trope arc in there, tucked away. That's not really a spoiler because you're going to know pretty early on that that's the arc they're going on. But those are some very good recs, Jenna. I like that. Thank you.
That would be my 4th one.
So my last question for you was, what is your number 1 writing tip? And then I'm going to go into some questions that we've had come through on the chat. So your number 1 writing tip.
My number 1 writing tip is like, it's quite vague, but it's just like, do what works for you. I feel like, especially when you're like starting out as a writer, I know I did this, is like you read all of the advice and you like listen to all the podcasts and read the books and everything, where it's like, there's so much advice and there's so many different forms of advice. And like, there's no right or wrong way to write. It is about what works for you, and you can like take advice that works and like you know, you basically cherry pick, and because everyone has different methods, and there's no perfect way to get the words on the page. You just got to do it. So I know that's really vague, but like that is really like focus on yourself basically. Forget about what everyone else is doing.
And probably just write. Actually write. Don't just procrastinate writing, maybe. Siobhan Plaza, who has a book coming out shortly called The Boy, the Wolf and the Stars, which I'm really excited to read. Siobhan Plaza wants to know, Jenna, what is your favorite romantic trope that you haven't written yet that you'd like to?
Or fake dating.
Oh, yes. That's such a good one. That's a good one. Write that.
Yeah, like which is two other boys I've done before, and like a bunch of Christmas movies, cheesy Christmas movies that I love. They're all like the Mistletoe Promise. It's like it's such a ridiculous premise, but I love it.
It is really, when it's done well, it's really, really good and very funny, and I love it too. That's a good one. Claire Lowe wants to know, what indicates for you that a plot hangs together really well in your work or others? How do you know when you have a complete, fully formed story? Like, what is I've heard it described by, I want to say like Maggie Stiefvater, once described it as, it sounds like a snick in her mind. You know that sound that a door makes when it hits the lock perfectly and it like catches? She said that when she hears the kind of snick in her mind when it comes to stories, she knows, it's all kind of falling into place. So what do you have? Do you have like a snick that you know, this is going to work?
I don't think so. I feel like I
me. You have me. You have me that you email it to and say, does this work yet?
Danielle be like, Danielle, who I can be like, help. I'm not very good at relying on my own judgment.
Well, no, but I was going to say for you, it's once you have a character's voice in your head. So I think your difficulty in trying to write Maisie's follow-up was that you already had Maisie's voice and you were kind of following familiar ground. You'd already gone over it. And it was the second that you had a new character's voice in your head that you thought, I quite like figuring out what this person has to say now. So can you talk about that, about how those voices come to you? Is it while you're walking the dogs? Is it while you're just literally sitting in front of the blank screen?
Yeah, with what I like about me, I talked about it a lot, but I basically tried a bunch of different ways to write it. And it was when I discovered like an old homework journal that I had kept that was quite snarky, that I was like, maybe I should try it in this journal style. And that immediately unlocked the voice for me. And then you were made for me. And I was always one of those people that was really skeptical about people that were like, it just entered my head and like it didn't come from anywhere. I was so skeptical. It's like, yeah, right.
Stephanie Meyer, who dreamed up the entirety of Twilight. Yeah, sure.
I was like, it comes from somewhere. But I do have to say, I feel like I was just like, I can't even remember. I feel like I was probably like procrastinating things in my room one day or something. I was like lying on my bed. And like that first line entered my head, as I mentioned earlier. And so straight away, I think I went to my computer and I started typing it. And within, once people see the book, you'll see like within like say 4 or 5 lines. So there's Katie's voice for a few lines, and then Libby's voice enters straight away. And that just happened. That I didn't plan it. That just what happened. So that just entered my head. And so I feel like I'm just going to try and trust that's my process of like, even with coming up with ideas, I'm not someone who has like 50 ideas that I want to work on. They kind of just come to me and I get excited about them, and then I work on them, and then I get towards the end of that project and I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do next? And that's when the ideas do come. So I think
I also think it's very lovely that you didn't have your protagonist's voice until you had their best friend's voice, which speaks to the fact that, as we were saying before, often the friendships kind of have the higher stakes and they matter a little bit more, because that's how you kind of know yourself, is those people that you associate with and how well they know you. So that's quite lovely that Libby is the one that sort of clung it all together. That's great. We have a question here from someone who I believe might be a family member, Kate Murphy, Guillaume. Yeah. How do you not just base the characters on real life people, or do you? I think there's like something accusatory in that. Or do you? Are they based on real people? We know that you have a brother who is famous and a cricketer. Where is the famous brother? Where is the famous cricket playing brother in the book? Where is he, Jenna? I think I'm reading some accusatory language into this, I'm assuming.
Maybe like 5 books in, I'll do the expose of my brother. No. No, I would say like the characters are all fiction, but I definitely take
Mm.
inspiration from real life, and like
Yeah.
it's hard not to, because like where else do you draw inspiration from? Like other than
Yeah.
80s movies meets real life. I would say like they're all totally fictional characters, but there's elements of real things in them. For instance, in You Were Made for Me, there's like a family dinner scene, which could be like word for word from some of the dinner scenes that I had as a teenager when I started dating my now husband. We were 15
Yeah.
when we started dating, so I would go around to his family dinners and be grilled and I'd be asked really inappropriate questions.
Love it. Love it.
So if anyone's watching, there you go.
I also have a feeling that in a future book, we're going to see a love interest who discovers that her partner, I don't know, eats snacks in the shower and has shower snacks. And it's going to be very obvious where that came from. Let's just say. But your hubby's cute, so we'll let him get away with that very weird habit.
Yes, when he doesn't follow me on Twitter, my husband likes shower snacks. That's been an ongoing saga lately.
Look, it's mostly just photos of him with your dog, so it's fine. Jodie McAllister, hi Valentine. Jodie McAllister has a question here about the obligatory Pacey's Creek question. She wants to know who in this book is the most like Jen Lindley.
That's such a good question, and I love Jen
It
Lindley.
It is.
I want to say, and this might sound a bit strange, but I want to say Anna in What I Like About is the most. But I think she's like the early Jen Lindley who hasn't discovered herself properly and who is quite insecure and needs to go on that journey. And that was why actually I was really interested in writing her story, because I felt like she was like a Jen that I could like redeem almost, you know, and take her on a journey where she comes into her power. So yeah, that's the most Jen character.
I love that. Megan Jacobson wants to know, do you make your playlist before you write your book and play it as you write, or do you make it after, once you know the sort of journey of your book?
I make it as I go. So I think I mentioned that Girls Just Want to Have Fun was like the start of it. I think it was Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and then I Want You to Want Me, which is like the great song from the 10 Things I Hate About You soundtrack. And they were the two that I started with, and I feel like I would just like, I don't really listen to music when I write fiction, so I usually just like play a song to get in the mood and then like turn it off and just write. So that's
me. Yeah, that's me.
They're the ones I started with, and then so as the book progresses and different scenes and characters come out, then that's when I find a new song and I add that to it. So I add as I go, and then probably once I get to the end of it, I'll be like, oh, are there any like vibes that are missing from it, and add those in.
Yeah, that's good. And I also think, just hearing that, I also think a good companion to your book as a movie, if you get into the mood of like, I want to keep watching stuff in this arena, 13 Going on 30, which I think that's a really good companion and a good soundtrack to complement your book as well, of You Were Made for Me. I think that works. I think that's pretty good.
Well, that's a really good example of a rom-com where it's like a magical kind of concept that really makes sense, but you just go with it because you go along for the ride. Like that's definitely inspiration from where it's like, you know what, don't overthink it. Don't worry about how they created this boy, please. Just go along on the journey and have
Very
fun.
true. Very true. And it does become grounded in reality once you get the magic out of the way. Yes, it's very, very true. We're just getting a whole lot of chats now about Hot Husband, Where Are the Dogs? I can't wait to see your books as Netflix movies. Me too, quite frankly. So I think what we have to do now is I'm going to do a little game with you, Jenna, and then I'm going to hand it over to you to say some final words, since this is your launch. And I know we did get a question in here from Chloe again, who wanted to know what are the sort of difficulties of launching in the time of COVID. And I'm just going to say probably everything. But as we also mentioned in the beginning, it's kind of nice that there's more accessibility and people from all over. I saw that we had, like I mentioned earlier on, someone from Malaysia tuned in, someone from New Zealand is here as well. If you want to shout in the chat where you're tuning in from, we'd love to know how disparate you all are and from where you've all come. So I think in lots of ways, some of the positives outweigh the negatives, even though it is kind of clunky and still being figured out. But I do want to play a game with you to cap things off, and then I want to hand it over to you to maybe tell people where they can buy books from, signed copies of your book, and also just any thank yous that you want to have, which is something that we miss with physical book launches, is being able to point out people in the crowd and embarrass them and say, hey, thanks for that. So we won't bring your mum on. Tell your mum to take a deep breath and calm down. I'm not going to drag her on the screen. It's okay unless she wants to. But I will hand over to you in just a moment to say thanks. Jenna's now like calming her down. It's okay. Jenna, let's play this or that before I hand it over to you to do thank yous, okay? Let's play this or that and see if I can trip you up and make you panic, okay? So this or that, Tom Holland's Umbrella lip sync battle or BTS Fake Love at the Billboard Music Awards.
No, you can't make me choose.
That's the face I wanted. Choose, choose, choose. Everyone chant with me, even though you're on mute. Choose, choose.
Look, I have to say Tom Holland's Umbrella, only because like that is just like something that I just watch. Like, I mean, I watch BTS in general constantly, but that is like the one thing that I come back to, like as a sole entity.
The BTS army are going to come for you on TikTok, can I just say? Okay, Chris Evans' Twitter account or Harry Styles' 2017 Rolling Stones interview?
Harry Styles' 2017 Rolling Stone interview, 100%.
Whoa, okay.
Constantly.
Wow, I'm okay. K-dramas or K-pop?
Well, I mean, this is a hard question because I watch a wide range of K-dramas.
Choose. One. K-dramas or K-pop?
I'm not a K-pop fan as such. I really only like BTS.
You don't like, okay, the whole K-pop army are going to come for you now. You're choosing K-dramas, is that correct? Oh, no. Okay. Next one.
Yeah.
No, you've made your bed. You have to lie in it now. Chris Hemsworth or Arnold Schwarzenegger?
In what context?
Oh, no, you can't do that. Just choose one.
Look, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I'm going to tell Chris Hemsworth. Okay, Dawson's Creek or Game of Thrones?
Dawson's Creek.
I didn't even hesitate. That's because of the last season. You didn't even hesitate. Wow.
The thing is, Dawson's Creek also ended really badly, but like
not as bad.
I think I had lower expectations for how Dawson's Creek would end versus how Game of Thrones would end. So
I agree with that. Okay, this next one's really hard. Becky Albertelli or Jenny Han? That face is what I wanted. Yes. Who is it?
I would say Becky Albertelli because I've read more of her books.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, Jane Austen or Taylor Swift?
Jane Austen. Sorry, I love that was Jane Austen.
That was pretty easy. New Ideas or Last Draft?
Last Draft.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. Well, that was my last question for you. And now, Jenna, thank you so much for inviting me to launch you. Well, we're not quite over yet. I want you to take the floor and say what you will to thank anyone that you want to thank, tell people where to buy the book for signed copies, alert. Over to you, Jenna.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank BTS and apologize to them for not choosing them.
Yeah, somebody set that out stats to Twitter sphere, please.
No, I want to thank you, Danielle, for hosting this launch and also for being my wonderful agent and helping me through the whole process. I feel like I would have, I wouldn't have had the idea if you hadn't have suggested I put the other one aside, and then you also came up with a brilliant title and talked me through a lot of meltdowns. So thank you for that. And the whole team at Jacinta Demaze Management, who are just the best girl gang to have on my side. I really want to thank my family. My mum and my husband are here tonight, trying to be as quiet as possible. But no, my whole family, I really appreciate their support as always. And I want to thank Kuniya for hosting this launch, and who also hosted my first launch, and a really just a wonderful bookstore and great supporters. And you can get signed copies of both of my books from Kuniya. You can either order online or they are open if you want to go in store.
You should also sign up to all their socials and their newsletter so you can see what more of these events you can follow online.
Yes, they're not doing it in store events at the moment, but I think they will be doing more online events, which is very exciting. You can also get Danielle's wonderful book, which looks like this, from Kinokuniya. And I want to thank everyone who has come tonight, who has, you know, shown up in support. Obviously, thank my publisher, Pam McMillan. But yeah, no, everyone who, everyone's been so lovely on social media, and I can see people in the chat, and it's, you know, it is hard to launch a book in this circumstance, and you don't get a lot of the real life things that make it feel like an actual thing that's happening and not just something that's in your head. So it's always nice to see faces and words on the screen of support. So thank you, everyone.
I think we are right on 7:30 now, so I think that's it for us. We're gonna say see you later. Unless, Jenna, do you have your camera with you? Do you want to take a photo of everyone? Just so you can have this momentous occasion.
Yes.
I will hold up a copy of the book.
Oh, yes, okay.
Come on, you're the social queen. Come on.
Let me put
so
it on.
If everyone wants to smile,
Yes.
everyone in their PJs especially.
I will take, hi everyone. Yay, thanks guys.
Yay. Thank you everybody for coming out. We got a cat in the photo. Yes, there was a cat. All right, thank you everybody. We're going to go now, and definitely check out this fabulous bookshop. They have signed copies. They have copies of my book, not signed. I'm in Melbourne. Hi. And everyone just stay safe. It's lovely to see you all. New faces, new faces. This is congratulations to Jenna. It is a fabulous book. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.